Some claimed the pit had always been there, a remnant of an ancient curse or a forgotten tragedy. Others believed it had been dug by human hands, but for what purpose, none could say. Regardless of its origins, the pit exuded an aura of malevolence, drawing the curious and the foolish alike into its grasp. Among the locals, tales of strange occurrences near the pit were common. People spoke of eerie whispers emanating from its depths, of chilling whines that seemed to carry the mournful cries of the departed. Animals refused to go near it, their instincts warning them of unseen dangers lurking within. Despite the warnings, there were those who dared to venture close to the pit, driven by a morbid curiosity or a foolish desire to unravel its mysteries. Among them was a young man named Ethan, whose fascination with the supernatural outweighed any sense of self-preservation. Ethan had heard the stories, but he dismissed them as mere superstition. To him, the pit represented an opportunity to prove the existence of the paranormal, to uncover secrets that had eluded mankind for centuries. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a sense of determination, he set out one moonless night to explore the pit's depths. As Ethan approached the edge of the pit, a chill ran down his spine. The air seemed to grow colder, and the forest around him fell silent, as if holding its breath in anticipation. Ignoring the sense of unease that gnawed at him, Ethan peered into the darkness below. The pit yawned before him, a gaping maw of blackness that seemed to swallow the feeble beam of his flashlight. With a deep breath, Ethan began his descent, carefully picking his way down the jagged walls of the pit. As he descended deeper into the earth, the air grew thick with the stench of decay. Strange shapes danced at the edge of his vision, fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures that seemed to dart just out of reach. Ethan pressed on, his heart pounding in his chest as he pushed further into the unknown. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the darkness, a low, mournful wail that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. He froze, his breath catching in his throat as he strained to locate the source of the sound. But the darkness offered no answers, only an oppressive silence broken only by the pounding of his own heart. For a moment, Ethan considered turning back, of fleeing from the pit and leaving its secrets undisturbed. But the lure of discovery was too strong, and he pressed on, determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Hours passed as Ethan descended deeper into the pit, the walls closing in around him like the jaws of some ancient beast. With each step, the air grew colder, until it felt as though ice flowed through his veins. And still, he pressed on, driven by a single-minded obsession to uncover the mysteries of the pit. Then, just as he reached what seemed to be the bottom, Ethan's flashlight flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. Panic clawed at him, threatening to overwhelm his senses as he groped blindly in the blackness. And then, he heard it again, the sound of wailing, closer now, as if it were right beside him. He could feel a presence in the darkness, something cold and malevolent that reached out to him from the depths of the pit. With a cry of terror, Ethan turned and fled, scrambling up the walls of the pit with a desperation born of primal fear. Behind him, he could hear the sound of something following, a relentless pursuit that drove him ever faster towards the surface. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan burst forth from the depths of the pit, gasping for air as he collapsed onto the forest floor. He lay there, trembling and exhausted, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees. But as he looked back at the pit, he knew that his ordeal was far from over, for he had glimpsed something in the darkness, something that should never have been, and he knew that the spirits of the pit would not rest until they had claimed him as their own. As Ethan lay there, trying to catch his breath, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. But what that something was, Ethan couldn't begin to fathom. Slowly, he rose to his feet, his muscles aching from his frantic climb out of the pit. He cast one last glance at the yawning darkness behind him, half expecting to see the shadows come alive with some unseen horror. But the pit remained silent, its secrets hidden in the depths below. With a shudder, Ethan turned away, eager to put as much distance between himself and the pit as possible. But as he stumbled through the forest, a sense of unease lingered, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. Days passed, and Ethan tried to put the events of that night behind him, convincing himself that it had all been a trick of the mind, a product of his overactive imagination. But try as he might, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed him out of the pit, something dark and hungry. Nightmares plagued his sleep, twisted visions of shadowy figures reaching out to drag him back into the depths. He would wake in a cold sweat, the echoes of their haunting wails still ringing in his ears. Desperate for answers, Ethan returned to the pit, determined to confront whatever lurked within its depths. But when he reached the edge, he found it sealed shut, as if it had never existed at all. Confused and frightened, Ethan searched the forest for any sign of the pit, but it was as if it had vanished without a trace. Had it all been a hallucination, a figment of his fevered imagination, or was there something more sinister at play? As the days turned to weeks and then months, Ethan's obsession with the pit grew, consuming him until it was all he could think about. He combed through ancient tomes and whispered legends, searching for any clue that might explain what he had seen that fateful night. But the more he searched, the more elusive the answers became. It was as if the pit had never existed, erased from history like a forgotten dream. Yet still, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that it was all connected somehow, that the pit held the key to a truth too terrible to comprehend. And so, he continued to search, driven by a desperate need to uncover the mysteries of the pit, no matter the cost. As Ethan delved deeper into his investigation, he uncovered fragments of obscure folklore that hinted at the true nature of the pit. Whispers spoke of ancient rituals conducted in the heart of the forest, of sacrifices made to appease dark forces that dwelled within the earth. But the more he learned, the more questions arose. Who had built the pit, and for what purpose? What had been unleashed that night when he dared to peer into its depths? And most importantly, how could he protect himself from the malevolent spirits that now seemed to haunt his every waking moment? Haunted by these questions, Ethan found himself drawn back to the forest night after night, his determination bordering on obsession. He scoured the undergrowth for any sign of the pit's existence, driven by a relentless need to uncover the truth. And then, just when he thought he had exhausted every avenue of investigation, Ethan stumbled upon a clue that sent chills down his spine. Hidden deep within the archives of a long-forgotten library, he discovered a reference to an ancient prophecy, one that spoke of a chosen one who would unlock the secrets of the pit and unleash its power upon the world. Could it be possible that he was the chosen one, destined to fulfill a dark and terrible destiny? Or was he merely a pawn in a game far larger than he could ever hope to comprehend? As Ethan wrestled with these questions, he felt the weight of responsibility bearing down upon him. If he truly was the chosen one, then it was up to him to confront the darkness that lurked within the pit and put an end to its reign of terror once and for all. But as he prepared to embark on his final journey into the heart of the forest, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that unseen eyes followed his every move with a hunger that chilled him to the bone. And so, with a heavy heart and a sense of foreboding, Ethan set out into the night, knowing that whatever awaited him in the depths of the pit, he would face it alone. For better or for worse, the fate of the world rested in his hands, and he would not rest until the truth had been revealed, no matter the cost. As Ethan ventured deeper into the forest, the shadows seemed to grow thicker, swallowing the feeble light of his flashlight and cloaking him in darkness. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind sent a shiver down his spine, as if the very forest itself were alive and watching his every move. But Ethan pressed on, his determination unwavering in the face of mounting dread. He knew that he was close now, close to uncovering the truth behind the pit and the dark forces that lurked within. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of wandering through the labyrinthine forest, Ethan stumbled upon a clearing bathed in moonlight. And there, at its center, lay the pit's yawning mouth gaping open like a wound in the earth. With a mixture of trepidation and grim resolve, Ethan approached the edge of the pit, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the weight of centuries of darkness pressing down upon him, urging him to turn back before it was too late. But Ethan refused to be swayed. With a deep breath, he stepped forward and peered into the depths below, his flashlight casting a feeble beam into the abyss. What he saw there chilled him to the bone, for within the pit, swirling shadows danced and writhed, coalescing into a malevolent form that seemed to beckon him closer. And as Ethan watched in horror, he realized that he was not alone. Ghosts, countless spectral figures drifted through the darkness, their hollow eyes fixed upon him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. They reached out to him with ethereal hands, their whispers echoing in his mind like the tolling of a funeral bell. But among them, There was one figure that stood out, a figure cloaked in darkness, its features obscured by a swirling vortex of shadows. And as Ethan met its gaze, he felt a chill unlike any he had ever known. For in that moment, he knew that he stood face to face with the true master of the pit, the entity that had lain dormant for centuries, waiting for the chosen one to set it free. With a sinking heart, Ethan realized the enormity of the task that lay before him. He was not merely a seeker of truth, but a pawn in a game far larger and more sinister than he could have ever imagined. But even as fear threatened to consume him, Ethan knew that he could not turn back. The fate of the world depended on his actions, and he would not rest until the darkness that lurked within the pit had been vanquished, once and for all. And so, with a prayer on his lips and a resolve of steel in his heart, Ethan stepped forward into the abyss, ready to confront the true horror that lay within. But whether he would emerge victorious or be consumed by the darkness that awaited him, only time would tell. As Ethan descended into the depths of the pit, the air grew thick with a suffocating darkness that seemed to cling to his skin like a shroud. The whispers of the ghosts echoed in his ears, their voices swirling around him in a cacophony of despair. With each step, Ethan felt as though he were descending into madness itself, the weight of the darkness pressing down upon him until he could scarcely breathe. But still, he pressed on, driven by a determination that bordered on obsession. And then, just as he reached what he thought must surely be the bottom, the darkness seemed to part before him, revealing a chamber unlike any he had ever seen. The walls were adorned with strange symbols and sigils, their meanings lost to time. In the center of the chamber stood an altar, its surface stained with the blood of countless sacrifices. But it was what lay atop the altar that made Ethan's blood run cold. A figure man, or what had once been a man, lay bound upon the stone, his eyes wide with terror and pain. He was emaciated, his skin stretched taut over his bones like parchment. And yet, there was a strength in his gaze, a defiance that spoke of a will unbroken by centuries of torment. As Ethan approached, the figure spoke, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Beware, chosen one," he said, his words a warning wrapped in desperation. "The darkness seeks to consume you, to bend you to its will. You must resist, lest you become that which you seek to destroy." But before Ethan could respond, a voice echoed through the chamber, a voice that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the earth itself. "Foolish mortal," it boomed, its words reverberating through the chamber like thunder. "You dare to challenge the darkness? You, who are but a speck in the vastness of eternity." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the true nature of the voice. It was the voice of the entity that had lurked within the pit, the darkness made manifest. And as he gazed into its swirling depths, Ethan knew that he stood on the precipice of a battle that would determine the fate of the world. But whether he would emerge victorious or be consumed by the darkness that lurked within, only time would tell. With a heavy heart, Ethan knew that his journey had reached its inevitable conclusion. The darkness that lurked within the pit was too powerful, too ancient to be vanquished by mere mortal hands. As the entity's tendrils of shadow closed in around him, Ethan felt a sense of resignation wash over him. He had fought bravely, but in the end, he was no match for the malevolent force that had plagued the world for centuries. And so, as the darkness consumed him, Ethan knew that he had failed in his quest to save humanity from its own destruction. The pit would remain a cursed and forbidden place, its secrets forever shrouded in darkness. But even as his consciousness faded into oblivion, Ethan clung to a sliver of hope that somewhere, somehow, someone would rise to take up his mantle, to continue the fight against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. And as his final thoughts slipped away into the void, Ethan whispered a prayer for the salvation of the world, for redemption in the face of despair, and for the light to triumph over the darkness once and for all.